The space station floated in the endless black like a silver seed waiting to grow. It circled a world called Veldrisfor, a planet where humans had built their newest colony. The station was old, much older than any human civilization. It belonged to the dragons. Corvithix stood at the great window and watched the stars turn slowly past. She had watched these same stars for 12,000 years. She remembered when they were younger and brighter. She remembered when humans were nothing but simple creatures living in caves on a small blue world far away. Now they traveled between stars and built cities on distant planets. Time moved strangely for dragons. Dragons were not like the creatures from old Earth stories. They did not breathe fire or sleep on piles of gold. They were something far stranger and far older. Corvithix stood 30 feet tall when she stretched to her full height. Her scales shimmered like liquid silver, catching light and bending it in ways that hurt human eyes to watch. Her mind held more information than all the libraries on Earth combined. She had lived so long that she had forgotten more than most species would ever learn. But she had never understood joy. This was not something Corvithix thought about often. Dragons did not think about feelings. They thought about knowledge, about patterns, about the great equations that held the universe together. Feelings were something smaller species experienced. Feelings were inefficient. The message came through her communication crystal on a cold morning in the station's artificial winter. The conclave of dragons had made a decision. A human was coming to the station as part of a cultural exchange program. Corvithix would be his observer. She read the message 3 times. Surely there was a mistake. She was a scholar of quantum mathematics, one of the greatest minds in dragon history. She had solved equations that had puzzled her kind for millions of years. And now they wanted her to watch a human? The conclave's reply was simple. The human was a craftsman of some kind. He made objects. The dragons wished to understand why humans spent so much time making things that served no clear purpose. Corvithix was chosen because she had never interacted with humans before. Her observations would be pure, unclouded by previous contact. Corvithix did not argue. Dragons did not argue with the conclave. She simply waited. The human shuttle arrived 3 days later. It was a small, ugly thing compared to dragon vessels. It looked like a metal bug crawling through space. Corvithix watched it dock with the station and felt nothing but mild curiosity. She had seen so many species come and go over the centuries. Humans were just another brief flame in the darkness. His name was Danny Weaver. He was 43 years old, which meant he had perhaps 30 or 40 years left to live. A blink of an eye. Less than nothing. He was small, as all humans were small, with brown hair that was turning gray at the edges and hands that were rough and scarred from years of work. He carried a worn leather bag over one shoulder. It looked heavy. Corvithix scanned it with her senses and found wood, metal tools, small pots of colored liquid, and other materials she did not immediately recognize. None of it seemed valuable. None of it seemed important. "Hello," Danny said when he saw her. He did not seem afraid, which surprised Corvithix. Most species trembled when they first saw a dragon. "I'm Danny. I guess you're my host?" "I am Corvithix," she replied. Her voice echoed strangely in the metal corridor, deeper than any human voice could ever be. "I am here to observe you." "Observe me doing what?" "Whatever it is you do." Danny laughed. It was a strange sound, bright and warm. Corvithix had heard laughter before in recordings, but never so close. It seemed to fill the empty space between them with something she could not name. "Well," Danny said, "I make toys." "That's what I do. I'm a toy maker." Corvithix processed this information. Toys. She knew the word. Objects designed for play, primarily used by young members of a species. They served no survival function. They contributed nothing to the advancement of knowledge. They were, by any logical measure, completely pointless. Why? She asked. Danny tilted his head like a curious bird. Why what? Why do you make toys? What purpose do they serve? Kids play with them, Danny said simply. They make children happy. But what do you gain from this? Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, another expression Corvithix found difficult to understand. I guess I gain the same thing. Happiness. This made no sense to Corvithix. She decided to reserve judgment until she had gathered more data. She led Danny to the quarters that had been prepared for him. The room was simple by dragon standards, but luxurious by human ones. Danny barely glanced at the comfortable bed or the window showing the spinning stars. Instead, he walked to a large empty table in the corner and set down his heavy bag. This will do nicely, he said. Good light, good space. I can work here. You intend to make toys here? On this station? That's why I came. Danny began unpacking his bag. He laid out blocks of wood in different colors and sizes. He arranged small knives and carving tools in a neat row. He set out pots of paint, brushes with soft bristles, and jars of something that smelled sharp and clean. The exchange program wanted me to show how humans make things by hand. Traditional crafts, they called it. Most humans use machines now, but some of us still do it the old way. Corvithix watched him work with her ancient eyes. His movements were slow and careful. He touched each tool like it was something precious. She could not understand why anyone would choose to do things slowly when faster methods existed. This is inefficient, she observed. Maybe, Danny agreed. He picked up a block of pale wood and turned it over in his hands, studying it from every angle. But efficiency isn't really the point. What is the point? Danny looked up at her. His eyes were warm brown, like the wood he held. That's a good question, he said. Maybe you'll figure it out while you're observing me. Corvithix doubted this very much. She had solved the mysteries of black holes and mapped the quantum structure of reality itself. Surely understanding why a small human made wooden objects for children would not take long. She was wrong. But she did not know this yet. She settled into the corner of the room, folding her massive body into a space that should have been too small for her. Dragons could do things like that, bend space around themselves when they needed to. Danny did not seem disturbed by her presence. He simply began to work, humming a soft tune under his breath as his hands moved over the wood. Corvithix watched, and without knowing it, she began to learn. Days passed on the station, each one exactly like the last. The artificial sun rose and set on schedule. The stars turned past the windows in their endless dance. And Danny Weaver carved his toys. Corvithix told herself she was simply doing her duty. The conclave had ordered her to observe, so she observed. She watched Danny select his wood each morning, running his fingers over the grain like he was reading a secret language. She watched him sketch rough shapes on paper before he began to carve. She watched him make mistakes, curse softly under his breath, and start again. It was the mistakes that puzzled her most. Dragons did not make mistakes. Their minds were vast and perfect. When a dragon created something, it emerged exactly as intended, flawless and complete. But Danny made mistakes constantly. He cut too deep. He painted outside the lines. He dropped things and broke things and ruined things he had spent hours making. And yet he kept going. Every single time. Does it not frustrate you? Corvithix asked one afternoon. Danny had just cracked a nearly finished wooden bird in half by pressing too hard with his carving knife. You have wasted half a day's work. Danny looked at the broken pieces in his hands. For a moment, his face was sad. Then he shrugged and set them aside. Sure, it's frustrating, but that's part of it. You can't learn without messing up. Dragons do not mess up. Then how do dragons learn? Corvithix considered this question. We absorb knowledge. We process information. We understand things because we are capable of understanding them. But do you ever get better at something? Do you ever struggle with a thing and then finally figure it out? No. We either know something or we do not. Danny picked up a fresh block of wood and began again. That sounds lonely, he said quietly. Corvithix did not understand what he meant. She filed the conversation away for later analysis and continued watching. The first toy Danny completed on the station was a small wooden horse. It was simple, almost crude by some standards. The legs were slightly uneven. The paint was not perfectly smooth. But when Danny held it up to the light, his whole face changed. He looked at that little horse like it was the most precious thing in the universe. There she is, he said softly. Hello, little one. You speak to it as if it were alive, Corvithix observed. In a way, she is. I made her. Part of me is in her now. That is not logical. It is merely wood and paint. Danny set the horse down carefully on his workbench. You know what? You're right. It is just wood and paint. But it's also more than that. Somewhere out there, there's a kid who's gonna hold this horse. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they're scared or sad or lonely. And this little horse is gonna be their friend. She's gonna go on adventures with them. She's gonna be there when they need her. How do you know this? Because that's what toys do. That's what they're for. Corvithix processed this information. It still did not make logical sense. But something about the way Danny spoke made her want to understand more. She began asking questions. At first, they were simple questions about technique. How did he choose which wood to use? Why did he prefer certain colors? What made one shape better than another? Danny answered all of them patiently, never seeming bothered by her curiosity. Then the questions changed. They became deeper, stranger. Why do you make toys instead of other things? She asked one evening. You could make furniture that people would use every day. You could make tools that would help them work. Why do you choose to make things that serve no practical purpose? Danny set down his brush and thought carefully before answering. My dad made toys, he said. His dad made toys too. Goes back generations in my family. When I was little, my dad made me this wooden train. Had my name carved on the side and everything. I still have it. I'm 53 years old, and I still have that train. Why do you keep it? It cannot function as transportation. It has no value. It has all the value in the world, Danny said. When I hold that train, I remember my dad. I remember sitting in his workshop, watching him work, smelling the sawdust and the paint. I remember being small and happy and safe. That train holds all those memories. It keeps them alive even though my dad is gone. Something shifted inside Corvithix. It was small, barely noticeable, like a star flickering at the edge of vision. She did not know what it was. She ignored it and continued observing. But she found herself returning to Danny's workshop more and more. She no longer watched through security feeds. She sat in the corner, her silver scales catching the light, and watched him work in person. Danny did not seem to mind. He talked to her while he carved, telling stories about his life on the colony, about his wife named Lucy who had passed away years ago, about his daughter named Penny, who was grown now and had children of her own. You will not live to see your grandchildren grow old, Corvithix said. It was not meant to be cruel. It was simply a fact. No, Danny agreed. I won't. But that's okay. I'll leave them something. The toys I make, the love I give them now, the memories we're creating together. That stuff lasts longer than I will. How can you accept this? The shortness of your life, the certainty of your ending? Danny was quiet for a long moment. His hands continued moving over the wood, smooth and sure. I guess because the shortness is what makes it matter, he said finally. If I lived forever, would anything feel important? Would this moment right now mean anything if I had infinite moments ahead of me? Corvithix had lived for 12,000 years. She had infinite moments ahead of her, stretching out into an eternity she could barely comprehend. And she realized, with a shock that ran through her ancient bones, that she could not remember the last time any moment had felt important. She looked at Danny Weaver. This small and fragile human with his rough hands and his simple tools. He was making a wooden duck now, painting its bill a cheerful orange. He was going to die someday, probably soon by her standards. Everything he made would eventually crumble to dust. Everyone who remembered him would eventually be gone, and yet he was happier than she had ever been. "Teach me," she said suddenly. The words came out before she could stop them. Danny looked up. "Teach you what?" "This." She gestured at the workshop, at the tools and paints and scattered wooden shapes. "Toy making. I want to understand. Not just observe. I want to understand." Danny studied her with those warm brown eyes. She was an ancient being, older than his entire species, powerful beyond his comprehension. And she was asking him, a simple toy maker, to teach her something. He smiled. "Okay," he said. "But we start from the beginning. No shortcuts." Corvithix nodded. For the first time in thousands of years, she felt something that might have been excitement. She had no idea what she was about to discover. The first lesson was humility. Corvithix had expected toy making to be simple. She had mastered the mathematics of collapsing stars. She had written equations that described the birth and death of universes. Surely carving a piece of wood into a pleasant shape would take her no time at all. Danny handed her a block of soft pine and a small carving knife. The knife looked ridiculous in her massive claws, like a toothpick held by a giant. She could have reshaped the wood with her mind, using the quantum forces that bent to her will. She could have heated it with her internal fire and molded it like clay. But Danny shook his head before she could begin. "No powers," he said. "No magic or technology or whatever it is dragons use. Just your hands and the knife. That's the only way to learn. This is inefficient." "Yep, do it anyway." Corvithix looked at the wood. She looked at the knife. She had not felt uncertain about anything in 3,000 years. This feeling was deeply unpleasant. She made her first cut. The knife slipped. A chunk of wood flew across the room and bounced off the far wall. "Too much force," Danny said calmly. "Try again. Gentle this time. Let the knife do the work." She tried again. This time, she cut too shallow and the wood barely moved. Then too deep, and the block split in half. Then at the wrong angle, and the whole piece crumbled into splinters. By the end of the first hour, Corvithix had destroyed 11 blocks of wood and produced nothing but a pile of debris. She had never failed at anything so completely in her entire existence. It was humiliating. It was infuriating. It was fascinating. "Why is this so difficult?" she demanded. "I can calculate the trajectories of 1 billion particles simultaneously. I can hold the complete history of 17 civilizations in my memory. Why can I not make a simple cut in a piece of wood?" Danny was grinning. She had come to recognize that expression as amusement. Because this isn't about calculating or remembering. This is about feeling. You have to feel the wood, feel the knife, feel the way they want to move together. Wood does not want anything. It is dead matter, is it? Danny picked up a fresh block and turned it slowly in his hands. Every piece of wood was alive once. It was part of a tree that grew in sunlight and rain. It has a grain, a direction, a personality. Some pieces want to become birds. Some want to become horses. You have to listen to what the wood wants to be. That is not scientific. No, Danny agreed. It's not. But it's true anyway. Corvithix did not believe him. But she kept trying. Days turned into weeks. Her claws became more careful, more precise. She learned to hold the knife loosely, to guide rather than force. She learned to read the grain of the wood, to work with it instead of against it. She made many mistakes. She destroyed many more blocks, but slowly something began to emerge. Her first successful carving was a sphere. Not a perfect sphere, not mathematically precise, but round enough. It sat in her palm like a small moon, marked with the scratches and gouges of her learning. It was ugly. It was clumsy. It was the most interesting thing she had made in centuries. "It is terrible," she said, turning it over in her claws. "It's yours," Danny replied. "You made it. That matters more than how it looks." Corvithix did not understand this, but she kept the sphere. She set it on a shelf in her quarters and found herself looking at it often. This small and perfect thing she had struggled to create. The next project was harder. Danny wanted her to make an animal. She chose a dragon because it was what she knew best. But a realistic dragon was too complex, so Danny suggested something simpler. A friendly dragon. A cartoon dragon, he called it. Round and cute and not scary at all. "Dragons are not cute," Corvithix protested. "We are ancient and terrible and magnificent." "Sure," Danny said. "But kids don't want ancient and terrible. They want something they can hug." So Corvithix carved a huggable dragon. It took her 3 weeks and 47 attempts. She carved the body round and soft. She made the wings small and stubby. She gave it big eyes and a gentle smile. Danny showed her how to sand the wood until it was smooth enough for small hands to hold without splinters. He showed her how to paint it in bright, happy colors. When it was finished, she held it up and felt something strange in her chest. It was a tightness, a warmth, a sensation she had no name for. "What is this feeling?" she asked. Danny looked at the little dragon in her claws. His eyes were soft. "That's pride," he said. "You made something. Something that didn't exist before. You brought it into the world with your own hands. That feeling is pride." Corvithix had accomplished great things in her long life. She had made discoveries that advanced dragon knowledge by centuries. She had received honors and recognition from the conclave. But she had never felt anything like this. This was different. This was personal. This tiny wooden dragon was hers in a way that nothing else had ever been. "What do I do with it now?" she asked. "Whatever you want. Keep it. Give it away. That's up to you. Give it away." The thought had not occurred to her. Dragons hoarded things. They collected and kept and never let go. The idea of giving something away, especially something she had worked so hard to make, seemed strange and wrong. But then she thought about what Danny had told her, about the children who would hold his toys, about the happiness those toys would bring, about the memories they would create. There were human children on the station. She had seen them in the corridors, small and loud and full of energy. They ran and laughed and played games she did not understand. They were afraid of dragons. She had seen them hide behind their parents when she passed, their eyes wide with terror. "There's a child on deck 7, Corvithix said slowly. "A young female. She has red hair and many freckles. She seems particularly frightened of dragons. You want to give her your toy?" Corvithix looked at the small wooden dragon in her claws. She had spent weeks making it. She had failed dozens of times. She had felt frustration and confusion and eventually something like triumph when it was finally complete. And now she wanted to give it away. "Yes," she said. "I want her to have it. I want her to know that dragons can be friendly. I want her to smile." Danny's face did something complicated. His eyes became wet, which Corvithix knew meant strong emotion in humans. He blinked quickly and looked away. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly the point. That's why we make toys." Corvithix did not fully understand yet, but she was beginning to, and the feeling in her chest, that strange warm tightness, was growing stronger with every passing moment. She carefully wrapped the little dragon in soft cloth and went to find the girl with the red hair. The girl's name was Grace. She was 7 years old, and she had lived on the station her whole short life. Her father was an engineer who kept the station systems running. Her mother was a doctor who helped the sick and injured. Grace had red hair that fell in wild curls around her face and a spray of freckles across her nose like scattered stars. She was terrified of dragons. Corvithix learned this from the station's records. When Grace was 4, she had wandered into a restricted section and come face to face with a dragon elder who was visiting from the homeworld. The elder had meant no harm, but his appearance had frightened the child so badly that she had nightmares for months. Ever since then, Grace hid whenever she saw silver scales in the corridor. This made Corvithix hesitate. Perhaps giving the girl a dragon toy was a bad idea. Perhaps it would make things worse instead of better. She stood outside the family's quarters for a long time, the wrapped toy clutched carefully in her claws, unsure what to do. Danny had come with her. He stood beside her now, small and patient, waiting for her to decide. What if she does not want it? Corvithix asked. What if she is too afraid? Then we respect that and leave her alone, Danny said. But you won't know until you try. Corvithix pressed the button that would announce her presence. She heard movement inside, then the door opened. Grace's mother stood there, her face showing surprise and then concern when she saw the massive dragon in her doorway. "Can I help you?" she asked carefully. "I have made something," Corvithix said. Her voice was softer than usual. She had practiced making it less frightening. "It is for your daughter, if she wants it." The mother looked down at the wrapped bundle in Corvithix's claws. She looked up at Corvithix's silver face, at the ancient eyes that had seen the birth of galaxies. She seemed to make a decision. "Grace," she called over her shoulder. "Someone is here to see you." There was a pause. Then, a small face appeared from behind a chair in the living area. Red curls, freckles, wide, frightened eyes. Corvithix lowered herself slowly to the ground, folding her massive body down until she was closer to the child's height. She moved carefully, gently, the way Danny had taught her to handle delicate wood. "Hello, Grace," she said softly. "My name is Corvithix. I know you are afraid of dragons. That is okay. I will not hurt you. I only wanted to give you something." Grace did not move. Her small hands gripped the back of the chair so tight her knuckles were white. Corvithix unwrapped the bundle slowly. The little wooden dragon emerged into the light. It was painted in soft blues and greens. Its eyes were big and friendly. Its smile was gentle. It looked nothing like a real dragon. It looked like a friend. "I made this," Corvithix said. "It took me a very long time. I made many mistakes. But I kept trying because I wanted to make something that would make you happy. I wanted you to know that dragons can be kind." Grace stared at the toy. She did not move for a long moment. Then, very slowly, she stepped out from behind the chair. "You made it?" she asked. Her voice was small and uncertain. "Yes, with my own claws. A human friend taught me how. Dragons don't make toys. This dragon does, now." Grace took another step forward, then another. She was close enough now that Corvithix could see the individual freckles on her nose, could hear the quick beating of her small heart. "Can I hold it?" Grace whispered. Corvithix extended her claw, offering the toy. Grace reached out with trembling hands and took it. She held it up to her face, examining it with the intense curiosity that all children seem to have. She touched its round belly. She traced the lines of its stubby wings, and then she smiled. It was a small smile at first, just a tiny curve of her lips. But it grew. It spread across her whole face like sunrise spreading across a world. Her eyes lit up. Her fear melted away. She looked up at Corvithix with wonder instead of terror. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you." Something happened inside Corvithix in that moment. Something broke open. Something that had been frozen for 12,000 years suddenly thawed and flooded through her ancient body like warm light. She knew what this feeling was. She had read about it in countless records. She had observed it in countless species. But she had never experienced it herself. Not once in all her endless years. Joy. This was joy. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was the most wonderful thing she had ever felt. All those millennia of existence, all those discoveries and achievements and accumulated knowledge, and nothing had ever come close to this. A small human child was smiling at a toy she had made, and it was better than watching stars being born. Grace hugged the little dragon to her chest. "I'm going to call him Sparkle," she announced. "He's going to be my best friend." "I think he would like that," Corvithix managed to say. Her voice was strange, thick with emotions she did not know how to express. Grace looked at her again, really looked at her this time. "You're not so scary," she said thoughtfully. "You're actually kind of nice." "Thank you, Grace. That is the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me." It was true. In 12,000 years, no one had ever called her nice. No one had ever looked at her without fear or reverence or cold respect. No one had ever seen her as anything but an ancient being of terrible power. This small child had looked at her and seen kindness. Corvithix stood slowly and stepped back toward the door. Grace waved goodbye with one hand, still clutching Sparkle with the other. Her mother's eyes were wet with tears. Danny was smiling so wide, it looked like his face might split in half. They walked back to Danny's workshop in silence. Corvithix was still processing what had happened, still trying to understand the feelings that were rushing through her. When they arrived, she sat down heavily in her corner and stared at nothing. "Now you understand," Danny said quietly. "Yes," Corvithix replied. "Now I understand." She understood why humans made toys. She understood why they created things that served no purpose except to bring happiness. She understood why Danny spent his limited days carving wood and painting colors instead of doing anything more practical, because this feeling was worth it. This joy, this connection, this moment of pure giving without any expectation of return. It was worth all the time and effort and failed attempts. It was worth more than all the knowledge she had accumulated in her endless life. Corvithix picked up a carving knife. Her claws were steadier now, more confident. "Teach me more," she said. "I want to make more toys. I want to feel this again." Danny's smile was warm and proud. "We're just getting started," he said, and they were. Word spread through the dragon conclave like ripples across still water. Corvithix, the cold and brilliant scholar, had become a toy maker. She had opened a small workshop on the station. She spent her days carving wood and painting colors instead of solving equations. She had been seen laughing. Dragons did not laugh. It simply was not done. The first visitor arrived 3 weeks after Corvithix gave Sparkle to Grace. His name was Thornvex, a young dragon barely 2,000 years old, still considered a child by their standards. He appeared in her workshop doorway with uncertainty in his golden eyes. "I heard stories," he said, "about what you are doing here." I did not believe them. Corvithix looked up from the wooden cat she was carving. Its stripes were coming along nicely. "The stories are true. You make toys. Objects for human children to play with." "Yes," Thornvex entered the workshop slowly. He looked around at the scattered tools, the pots of paint, the half-finished creations waiting on shelves. He looked at Danny, who was working quietly in his own corner, painting a set of wooden soldiers. "Why?" Thornvex asked. Corvathix set down her carving knife. She remembered asking Danny that same question months ago. She remembered how confusing his answers had seemed. Now she understood them completely. "Because it brings joy," she said simply, "to the children who receive the toys. And to me, when I make them, joy." Thornvex said the word like he was testing a new flavor. "I have read about joy. I have never experienced it. Neither had I, not until I learned this." Thornvex looked at the wooden cat in her claws. "Will you teach me?" And so it began. Corvathix taught Thornvex, who taught others still. Dragons came from across the galaxy to visit the small workshop on the station orbiting Veldris 4. Some came out of curiosity. Some came to mock. But many stayed to learn that it was not easy for them. Dragons were proud and ancient and unused to failure. But toy-making required failure. It required patience and humility and the willingness to try again after making mistakes. It required feeling instead of just thinking. Many dragons struggled. Many gave up. But those who persisted discovered something remarkable. They discovered a part of themselves they had never known existed. They discovered joy. Danny watched it all with quiet amazement. He had come to the station as a simple craftsman, expecting to demonstrate his trade for a few months and then return home. He had never imagined he would change an entire civilization. "You did this," Corvathix told him one evening. They were sitting together in the workshop, surrounded by the evidence of their work. Dozens of toys lined the shelves. Dozens more waited to be finished. "You taught us something we could never have learned on our own." Danny shook his head. "I just showed you how to carve wood. You did the rest. No, you showed us how to feel. That is far more valuable." The conclave called Corvathix to make a formal report. She stood before the eldest dragons in the galaxy. Being so old, they remembered the universe when it was young and hot and full of possibility. They listened as she spoke about toys and joy and the strange gift humans had given to their kind. "Humans offer something unique," Corvathix told them. "Not technology, not military strength, not even their creativity, impressive as it is. They offer the ability to find meaning in small things. They teach us that purpose does not require utility, that creating something beautiful is its own reward. That joy is not a weakness to be suppressed, but a strength to be embraced." The eldest dragon, a being named Ajrathine who had lived for 900,000 years, considered these words carefully. "You suggest we should learn from humans? From creatures who live less than a single century? I suggest we have already learned from them, and that we should be grateful." There was a long silence. Then Ajrathine did something no one had ever seen her do. She smiled. "Very well," she said. "Let it be recorded that humans have taught dragons how to feel joy. Perhaps they are more remarkable than we thought." Danny's exchange contract ended on a quiet morning in the station's artificial spring. His shuttle was loaded and ready. His bags were packed. He had said his goodbyes to Grace, who had grown several inches and no longer feared dragons at all. She had become a regular visitor to the workshop, learning to carve her own simple toys under Corvathix's patient guidance. Now only Corvathix remained to see him off. They stood together in the docking bay, the small human and the ancient dragon. So much had passed between them. So much had changed. "Thank you," Corvathix said. The words felt inadequate for what she wanted to express. "For everything you have given me." Danny smiled his warm smile. "Thank you for being willing to learn. That took courage. More than you probably realize. What will you do now?" "When you return home?" "Same thing I always did. Make toys. Watch kids smile. Be happy. He paused. Maybe I'll tell people about the dragon who learned to carve. They probably won't believe me. Perhaps someday they will. Corvithix reached into a fold of her scales and withdrew a small object. It was a sphere of crystal, perfect and clear, containing a captured fragment of starlight. It was one of the most precious things in her hoard, a treasure she had kept for 6,000 years. For your workshop, she said, offering it to him. So you never have to carve in the dark. Danny took the crystal with trembling hands. He held it up and watched the starlight dance inside. His eyes grew wet. It's beautiful, he whispered. You taught me to make beautiful things. This is the only way I know to thank you. Danny hugged her then, or tried to. He wrapped his small human arms around as much of her silver body as he could reach. Corvithix had never been hugged before. It was strange and wonderful, and over too quickly. Goodbye, Corvithix, Danny said. Keep making toys. Goodbye, Danny Weaver. Keep bringing joy. He walked into his shuttle without looking back. The door closed. The engines hummed to life. And then he was gone, climbing up into the stars, returning to his small, ordinary life on a distant world. Corvithix watched until the shuttle disappeared from view. Then she returned to her workshop. She picked up a carving knife and a block of fresh wood. She studied the grain, feeling for what the wood wanted to become. A human, she decided. She would carve a small wooden human with patient hands and a kind smile. She would keep it on her shelf forever, to remind her of what the youngest species in the galaxy had given to the oldest. They had given her joy, and joy. She now understood was worth more than all the stars in the sky. She began to carve. And in a workshop on a station orbiting a distant world, surrounded by toys that would bring happiness to countless children, the ancient dragon smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real, and that made all the difference.